Hello, this is Karen Johnson, and we're on another edition of our Proctors History tapings. We have a very exciting show today on July 1st, 2016, and we have with us Harvey Rapp and Bruce Rapp, their cousins, and both of them, their whole family was enmeshed in the entertainment business in Schenectady, the theater business, and they have a lot of memories of the period of Proctors when the Fabian Theaters, particularly when the Fabian Theaters owned the theater. So gentlemen, welcome. And I'd just like to mention that the cause of this, your being in town, Harvey, is that you brought back some memorabilia that's priceless to Proctors, and here it sits. So could you tell us about how you came to have this and what it is?
Well, I believe my father obtained this from Proctors Theater after it closed, and we've had it in my mother and father's house for several years. In fact, my cousin Rochelle this morning was saying she remembered seeing that chair upstairs in my father and mother's house. I didn't remember where it was, but it was upstairs in one of the bedrooms. And then after my father passed away, my mother was about to move out of the house, and she wanted me to take that chair. And I took it down to the Columbia, Maryland, where I'm living now. And we used it in various rooms, bedrooms, living room, and I have a memorabilia room that's where it was last used, and I was the one probably the last one to sit on it all the time. And it's a very sturdy chair. And
it's amazing.
It
today it looks almost perfect.
That's what's amazing about it. I made no changes to it. It is strictly an original chair. The veneer, the upholstery, all is original. And wondering myself if this chair actually dates back to the late 1920s. It could be over, they were saying this is an 80-year-old chair. This could be actually 90 years old.
Mm-hmm. Well, just for our audience to know, the theater was built in 1926 and opened, and the people that are on our history committee were so excited to have this because they don't have any artifacts from those days that they've substantiated. And they've looked at it and they think it dates from around 1930, which was right after,
Yes.
This is plus or minus, obviously. So this caused you to ship the chair to Schenectady, and then we had a wonderful ceremony.
It was great yesterday. And by the way, I think Bob Warlick was a big influence in my sending the chair back to Proctors.
Great.
He had given me a tour a few years ago of the new Proctors, before it has actually completed its renovation in the last couple of years. But I was so impressed with the way the theater looked. I said to myself, I think the chair I have needs to be brought back.
Great. Well, we appreciate it very much. Now let's talk a little bit about your dads, because your family seemed to have like a corner on running theaters in the Schenectady and even in the Capital Region. So your dad, who was Phil Rapp,
Yes.
tell us what he did at Proctors.
Well, when he came to Proctors, he succeeded Guy Graves, who had died. And Guy Graves was the city manager of the Fabian Theaters. And that was in 1956. And I believe in 1956, Fabian Theaters had about 57 theaters in New York State. So it was a big firm. And I met Cy Fabian, and I met Lou Rosen, the top people, and actually Mr. Fabian's son as well over the years. But he was housed in, his headquarters was in New York City.
Okay, so your dad worked for Fabian from
1950, well, it was from 1930, in the 1930s to 1971. when he
Okay,
retired.
that's a pretty long stretch. And your dad his name was?
Lewis.
Lewis.
And he was the manager of the Plaza Theater, but he first was the manager of the Strand, which was on Barrett Street. He went from the Strand to the Plaza Theater, and when they closed the Plaza Theater, he went to the State and Erie Theater. There was 2 theaters there, which some people don't realize, because that other one was knocked down a long, long time ago, leaving just the State Theater. And he worked there until about 1970, probably. And that was his career in Schenectady.
So you had other entertainment-oriented people in the family. Abe Rapp, who I remember very well for the fact that every time he saw me, he gave me a butterscotch hard candy.
Yeah.
What do we know about Abe?
He was the president of the Musicians Union, and him and my Uncle Freddie, they lived on McClellan Street with my grandmother until she passed away. And Uncle Freddie owned George's Music Store, and that was right next to the Plaza Theater. And they were just the greatest guys growing up. You know, it was a very close family. We had dinner at their house every Tuesday, and it was, growing up with them was just, and he was my Uncle Freddie taught me to trumpet.
He taught me too, by the way.
He taught
We
him
should have
too.
brought trumpets today.
Right.
I know.
yes.
And then I played in the band at Shaker High School for 4 years in the band there. And I played it up till maybe, you know, you get a little older and then you don't play anymore.
But I think it's pretty amazing. Now, you did have some aunts also, so there were girls in this family as well.
Absolutely, yes.
And how many girls were there at that generation?
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Well, my mother is Ruth Rapp, and she was behind the great man my father fell, and my Aunt Lee was Bruce's mother.
So that was quite a family, and to me, it's so interesting how they all kind of gravitated to entertainment. Do you,
Well,
do
they
you have
all-
a theory on that?
They also had Uncle Abe, Uncle Phil, Freddie, and my father. They had 2 sisters, Faye and Clara. And Faye and Clara lived here until maybe the 60s or 70s.
I think in the 50s.
50s maybe, and they moved. One moved to Colorado, one moved to Newburgh. But there was a big family, you know.
I think where the music part came out with my uncles Abe and Uncle Fred was when they were living at the Masonic home in Utica. When my father was 2.5 years old, his father died. His name was Herman Rapp. And at that time, my grandmother Lena could not take care of them all, so she sent she sent Abe and Fred and Clara to Utica, and they grew up there. But they learned all the musical crafts there. And my father, my Uncle Louis, and my Aunt Faye, who was the youngest, stayed here.
Great.
And my father early got a job with Farish Theaters and then RKO, and he started off as an usher. He did maintenance. He did housekeeping, as did my Uncle Lou as well. So they grew up doing the menial tasks. They knew the theater from the ground up.
From the broom up.
Broom up, yeah.
Right. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
And I saw and I can tell you that I often saw my father sweeping the arcades, or mopping,
Or making me do it.
and he also, oh really? Okay. But he also made sure that the coal was in for the furnaces. He went
Well,
down
he
and
was-
shoveled the coal.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's really great. So I just like to mention one thing about Abe, because he continued in a relationship with Proctors after the not-for-profit was formed.
Oh.
And Dennis Madden, he was still head of the union. And Dennis Madden, who was the executive director, told me yesterday that he was very good at helping Proctors get grants from the Performance Trust Fund, which paid for free entertainment here. So your family, your interest in it, both of you, and Abe's interest really have helped us keep alive a lot of the history of Proctors, and
Right.
it's great.
Yeah, I know.
And I have a video that I did of my Uncle Lou. It's on VCR though, and
You
I
gave it to
interviewed.
me, but I don't have a VCR yet.
Yeah, I have it. I forgot to bring it today, but I interviewed him in 1988.
Oh, that's
and I,
wonderful.
And I specifically interviewed him to find out about the movie business and what it was like to work for the theaters. And it's a remarkable interview, and I'm hoping that we can get it on DVD so we can share it with everybody in Schenectady.
Good. Well, we may be able to give you some technical support on that.
Terrific, yes.
Good. So everybody is working in that generation, and they're doing important work for the city that really was formative. And we had Mr. Fabian, who owned Proctors, but what other theaters did
He owned
own?
them all. He owned the State Theater, the Plaza,
The Strand, the
Strand,
Mohawk
the
Drive-In.
Mohawk Palace. He owned them all.
So the custom was at that time he would own all the theaters
He owned
in
them
a...
all.
Right.
Yeah.
By the way, Bruce has brought a picture of Cy Fabian, here Bruce, and he's going to donate that to the Proctors Theater. It's a signed picture, by the way, and this is the man who took over all the movie theaters in Schenectady back in the 1930s.
At that picture, he looks pretty prosperous.
Yeah, he does.
Yes, he
In fact,
was.
I'm pretty sure he was.
Do you recall what it was that made him decide to sell the theaters, which he did at a certain point?
We don't. Although he probably was, he probably passed away or something, and they split everything up and they sold it. And then people just, some of the theaters went out of business, some stayed. Like the Palace. The Palace stayed right through for a long time, which is still going now.
It's still going.
Yeah. And the Madison, I hear the Madison now is back in
That
business
was one
again.
of his theaters?
Yeah, yeah. Madison,
Well, so
Strand.
he's had quite a legacy in our area
Yeah.
also.
He had, and Proctors Troy, the Cohoes Theater, he owned them all. He owned all those theaters.
As I said, there were 57 theaters that he
Yeah.
owned in New York State, all
Yeah.
through the state, as well as New York City.
Wow. Well,
And just can you imagine what he had in New York City? So,
I remember much talk about all these theaters, but when I came here in 1967, very few were left.
Yeah.
So
right, yeah.
I didn't have that experience, but
Yeah.
it was partly the success of movies at that time, and television came in and made it a little harder to make money in
Right,
that field.
right, yeah.
So we've talked about the early generation. Now, what about you two? You must have had things to do with these theaters. Harvey, you told me a few stories about yourself as a worker here.
Well, I served as a stagehand when I was in college, when I was back on vacation in the winter, and I remember being underneath something that I think it was Rosalind Russell had to stand on top of it and had to be sure that it didn't move. And I was on stage, but nobody could see me.
Were you all in black?
No, they just said, get under there, nobody's going to see you.
Oh, you were
Make sure it doesn't
hidden.
move.
Okay.
And I believe that Bruce was a stagehand at one time as well.
Yeah.
He did everything with the movies,
Well,
too.
Bruce, you worked in some
Well,
theaters.
I worked
also.
in pretty much all of them. I worked at the Proctors in Troy with my father back in '64. Then when I got out of the service in '71, Al Matarazzo had bought the Proctors, the State, the Cohoes Theater, and the Proctors in Troy. And I started working for him. And I ran the State Theater for him, and here too. And so I was in that, right after being in the service 4 years.
So what years would those have been
I
approximately?
got out in '70. I went into the service in '67. Got out in '71 and started in '71 and worked till they closed all the theaters in '77. Then I went into a different business.
Now,
food
in
business.
Proctors, this Proctors had some shows after 70, well, no, it didn't.
No.
77 is
They
when
were
it
all
closed.
shut down, right? When,
Because the new corporation was formed in 77,
right.
and they took over the actual operation in 79.
Right.
I think that was one of the best decisions that Schenectady made.
Yeah, it was.
You know, it's a fascinating thing to think about how that all happened, because it's very mysterious to try and unravel.
Yeah.
By the way, another story, just a short one. My father always promised that I could be an usher when I was a kid. I always wanted to be an usher. I loved the ushers. And when I turned 16, he said you could be an usher. When I became 16, he gave me all kinds of excuses why I had to wait longer. Anyway, I never became an usher, but that
So
was just an interesting
Most of the
sideline.
time when Fabian was here, was it just movies? Did they have any
Yeah.
stage entertainment of any type?
No, not here. Not here. Not in Troy, Proctor's, Troy? No.
Well, no, Proctor's Schenectady, they had stage productions,
When?
including like Blackstone, the magician. I remember
What
going,
years was that? I can't.
well, that was in the 50s. I remember
Oh, okay.
going up on stage at age, I was 5 years old, and Blackstone miraculously brought up a rabbit, and he was going to give it to me, and he said, well, what do you want to call the rabbit? And I said, Philip, and everybody had a big laugh on that, and I just remember being with him that time. It was an exciting experience for me.
And you have a photo of his show from
Yes.
the 50s.
Yes, I do, yes.
And that's pretty exciting because, as I told you before we made this taping,
Mm-hmm.
Blackstone Jr. was the first big show that the new corporation.
I didn't
the
realize that. That's a
nonprofit.
surprise, yes.
So they picked it because of the tradition,
Uh-huh.
and you were on stage for the first one.
I know.
We should have made sure you came back for the second
That would have
one.
been interesting, yes. But nobody knew it till today.
Now, you didn't have to sweep and do all that stuff, or did you? I mean,
No.
you mentioned your dad had to check the coal, check the.
The furnaces, yes.
So he was just in charge of everything.
He was the general manager of the theater and all the theaters in Schenectady at one
So,
time.
Do you remember if they had concessions and
Oh, yes,
kind of what was
definitely.
there?
Oh,
and
of course.
Yep. Popcorn.
Popcorn?
Oh, yeah.
Good
Plaza.
popcorn?
Oh, fantastic popcorn.
This is not related to Proctor's, but I remember being there with my friend Brian Gipstein, son of Dr. Milton Gipstein in Schenectady. We were very best friends, and we were standing in the middle of the lobby of the State Theater having our popcorn and putting our hands into the boxes, and the bottom of the popcorn opened up, and all the popcorn smelled on the floor.
And you were not an invited guest anymore after that?
So I just went over to my dad and told him what happened, and he made sure it got cleaned up. Whether he cleaned it or not, I don't remember, but it did get cleaned up. Okay.
So he had a person running concessions, I assume?
Oh, yes, he had people
Usually
there.
it was a
And
lady
how
that
did they
was
sell
about 80.
tickets in those days?
Yeah.
Was there just, they went to the ticket booth and people just,
Yeah, they had a roll of tickets, and it went into the machine, and you'd punch, like say 2, they'd say 2, you hit the 2 button, and 2 tickets would
Pop
come
out.
out, pop out.
so it was a mechanical
It
system?
was a mechanical thing, yeah.
Not like now where we generate it
No.
on computer?
No, it was different, way different.
By the way, I remember some of the people. I hadn't thought of this woman till today. Her name was Alice Smith, and she was a housekeeper at the State Theater. And she always used to take me out and buy me toys at Kresge's. And my father always used to get upset that I influenced her to the point of buying something for me.
Well, you were a regular kid then.
I was a regular kid at that time, yes.
You had mentioned to me that one of your relatives had a business on the top of the arcade?
Oh, yes, my Uncle Arnold Pollock and my
Whoa.
Aunt Lillian Pollock, they had a beauty parlor upstairs they're now a men's room and a women's room up there. But right at that particular spot was the beauty salon.
And my mother worked there too.
And my mother worked there. His mother worked there.
Do you remember what any of the other shops in the arcade
Oh,
were?
and my uncle also had a photography studio that was down the hall to the left, around the corner. He had a photography studio. I forget what the name of it was, but that was there.
Mustlers was
And
in Proctors.
Mustard's, yeah. I have a picture of Mustard's I brought with me, with all his employees.
Because it seemed like most of the little businesses were very small. The size of the office in the old arcade.
Yeah, they were.
They were, yes. Well, Mustard's was there for years.
Yeah, Mustlers was there a long time.
A women's clothing store.
Yes,
And then
well,
the other way, you get into the Carl Company, you know.
and Carl's was there, and
Right.
did they have the Christmas windows during the
Of
time?
course. Oh, yeah.
Of course.
I remember
Woolworths was across the street.
Yeah, Woolworth's across the street in Kresge's. I remember going to lunch with Mr. Carl several times with my father. He was a really nice man,
Yeah.
Mr. Carl.
I remember the tuna fish sandwiches.
At the Carl Company
At the Carl Company.
Cafe?
They were
cafeteria?
the best tuna fish sandwiches I've ever had.
And Mr. Carl brought his mother in many days for
Yes, I
lunch.
met her too.
And chocolate shakes.
And so did you know that the
I had them also.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
the women in the drapery department made our first curtain?
Really?
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great.
So Mr. Carl was a great friend of the theater, and we've ended up with all those display windows now. Of course, we own the whole building, so
Yeah.
we're in
Yes.
the Carl Company right now, the building
Do you remember the elevator?
that was hand operated.
Yeah, and there was a man that's with a uniform on there that would take you up the second
Do you
floor.
remember
third
getting
floor.
out and someone's playing the organ?
Yeah, oh yeah, I do.
Because Mr. Carl loved organ
Right.
music.
Yeah.
And you still have the
Charles
stairway
Carl.
going down to the lower floor.
I can't remember anything today, but I remember all those things in the past.
Well, listen, that's what we're here for. If we can put the past on tape, we're not going to worry about the future. That's
Do you
someone
remember what we're
else's
talking
problem.
about?
Yeah, I know.
I want to see, do you think we've covered pretty much everything here?
It's just
that we
nice
wanna
that
talk
you
about.
have this, what you're doing with the Proctors and downtown Schenectady. It's really nice, you know. And to live here my whole life, pretty much.
My heart is still in Schenectady.
Yeah.
So Harvey, how often do you get back?
Well, it's the first time I've been here in a couple of years, actually, maybe more than that. I like to come here as often as possible, but my work down in Maryland just keeps me there too much. But
And his sister was just up a couple weeks ago.
yeah, my sister
She lives in
Arlene.
California. And we went out to lunch together with my sister.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Well, you seem to have wonderful memories of all these different Schenectady things.
Yeah, it made an impression on us. I mean, things were totally different. If you walked down Schenectady in those days, everybody was happy. There was nobody hurting anybody, you know, and it was just a great life.
It was a safe place
It's not
to
like
be.
it is today.
So
Yeah,
did you go to the peanut store? And
Oh yeah, Planters Peanuts right
Yeah.
a couple doors down. The smell, you walk by, you had to go in. You could
That's
not
right,
walk
yeah.
by it without going in it. Really.
how
it's-
about a new business for you? We could have you make hot peanuts on the
There
street.
you go.
No, I'm very busy with my grandchildren now. So.
I'll tell you a funny story about my father, Phil. He got a car with seat belts for the very first time. And I guess he drove it from the dealership, and he went down to I guess to go to Proctors, and when he got there, he couldn't get out of the car. He couldn't figure out how to get out of the seat belts, so he went back on State Street and stopped in front of Baum's newsroom, which was right by the bridge.
Yeah.
And he started tooting the horn. I think Nussbaum's might have been right over there too, Nussbaum's. But anyway, he tooted the horn, and some of the owner of Baum's newsroom came out and showed him how
Harry.
to get out of the car.
Leva.
Harry Leva. Yeah.
Harry,
Leva.
right, Harry Leva. Yes.
I remember it like it was
Did
yesterday.
he place a bet there, even though I know they didn't do
I
that?
remember looking in the back room there, and they were all
I can tell you
doing
how.
They were huddled.
doing
I
the
can tell
numbers.
you how far we
Yes.
go back. They used to come by for the numbers, with little sheets of paper, and they'd come outside, and they'd write up.
Now, none of that happened at Proctors, I'm
No,
sure.
No,
not at all. No.
I think my grandfather, Solomon Levine, he did some work for Harry Leva.
Yeah.
He was always
Okay.
walking around doing things for people.
Well, it was good
The messenger.
exercise. Well, at least all those things, they were in good fun,
Oh yeah, it was. It's different. It's all different today.
but we've been very proud to grow and to be the stimulus of a lot of redevelopment in
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
downtown. And I've been at Proctor since 1993, so I've seen
Terrific.
tremendous change. And that's one reason we're doing these history things, is to really preserve some of the times and the people, and you're an important part of that. So I want to thank you very much for coming and joining us today. We're
you're
very
very welcome.
appreciative.
Yep.
You're
thank
very
you for
welcome.
having us.
And we appreciate
Most
having somebody
enjoyable.
like you interview us.
Right.
You're a tribute to Schenectady.
Well, thank you, and I want to just thank our audience for watching today. It is July 1st, 2016, and this is part of the Proctors History Committee project to preserve the history of Proctors Theater. Thank you.